Hi there. This is a real quick run through of our slide deck on tone. So the definition of tone is really important. It's the attitude of the author towards the subject or message of the text. Here's another way of saying this. The tone is the speaker or writer's feelings or judgment about the subject at hand. So here's the thing I've been seeing. When we talk about tone, we'll often write, the tone is negative, or the tone is pedantic. But that's missing a big piece of what tone is when you write about it. The tone, you're writing about the attitude, but you're not telling us what that attitude is towards. So you're leaving out the message or subject. I'll explain that more in a second here. Tone is always a claim because the author, nowhere in their speeches or essays or articles do they ever say, my tone is, or my attitude is, right? You're using clues from the text to make an inference, your best guess at what the tone is. So it's arguable. You have to prove it. So when you use tone as a claim, you do want to identify the subject or message of the text. So the author's attitude is negative towards what? You have to say what that what is. You do have to identify a precise adjective that describes the author's attitude or feelings or judgment about the subject or message. So saying it's negative or positive is actually not a good or sophisticated way of talking about tone. You want to choose a word that's more precise. So you're going to end up writing your claim like this. The author's last name, one or two specific rhetorical choices illustrate their tone word towards the subject or message. So this is a really good sentence frame to adopt and to practice using when you make your claim about an author's tone. What I don't want you to do when you're using tone as a claim is to write your claim like this. The author's tone is pedantic. It's zero for sophistication. It's missing the message. You don't need to say tone. All you have to do is refer to the attitude, and people who have studied English will know that you're talking tone. Don't identify the adjective without identifying what the adjective is describing. So again, the attitude, feeling towards what specifically. Don't make a claim about the tone without proving that you understand what the word adjective, the tone word, means. There is a real tendency to look up words in the thesaurus or to choose smart sounding words, but then in your explanation to describe them in a way that tells your audience you don't understand what they really mean. That can happen when you choose a synonym for a word and don't understand that that synonym has different connotations. It may have the same denotation, dictionary definition, but the connotation could be different enough that it doesn't work. All right. And then don't make a claim about the tone without providing evidence and a clear explanation of how your evidence proves that the tone exists. So here's an example from Sanders and Lewis, two texts that we have read this year. Sanders uses figurative language and historical allusions to convey a derogatory attitude towards Rushdie's idea that shifting ground or moving is a virtue. So here I've identified two rhetorical choices that are going to appear in the supporting evidence I'm going to use to prove that this tone, derogatory, exists. And specifically that he's being derogatory towards Rushdie's idea that shifting ground or moving is a virtue. This is the subject in which he has this attitude. Okay. Here's another one. Lewis. Lewis juxtaposes the past and present to convey his optimistic attitude towards the idea that current and future generations will stand up for what is right. So here the rhetorical choice is that he juxtaposes the past and present. I'm going to have to provide quotes in my paragraph to prove that he has an optimistic attitude. I'm going to have to provide quotes that show that he is juxtaposing the past and present, and that juxtaposition comes together to prove this optimistic attitude. And that optimistic attitude is being conveyed towards the idea that future generations will stand up for what is right. Okay? So here's what that looks like in a paragraph. Here's my claim. Sanders uses a rhetorical question and figurative language. Rhetorical question and figurative language to convey a derogatory attitude towards Rushdie's idea that shifting ground or moving is a virtue. So I'm going to have to provide a quote that uses a rhetorical question and also identify figurative language as I'm talking about how that proves that derogatory attitude. All right. In lines 40 to 43, Sanders laments, but who would pretend that a history of migration has immunized the United States against bigotry? So here, this is the rhetorical question, and I also see some figurative language in here. Immunized is being compared to moving. So that is interesting. When you compare two things without using like or as, it's a metaphor. So this word immunized is being used as a metaphor. So in this quote, I have both a rhetorical question and figurative language, but I'm going to need to explain that. So here I do. Sanders knows, as does the audience, that the answer to whether or not we've been immunized against bigotry is no. Written in 1993, the LA race riots would have been fresh in both Sanders and his audience's memory. Here's where understanding the rhetorical situation can be powerful. I know that just a year before this was written, in 1992, there were the LA race riots in which videotape of Rodney King being beaten by police officers was leaked to the media. And those police officers were found innocent, and LA erupted in riots. And knowing that context can help me convey some information to my audience, some judgments about that rhetorical question. So again, written in 1993, the LA race riots would have been fresh in both Sanders and his audience's memory. Additionally, the comparison of immunization, a shot that cures an individual of disease, or maybe a better way to say that would be a shot that prevents people from getting a disease, with Rushdie's concept of migration as a cure for bigotry, is absurd, as it's intended to be. So notice, guys, I didn't say metaphor anywhere here, but I did say comparison. And I'm talking about the comparison of immunization with migration. And so I don't have to say metaphor, because anyone who's experienced in reading rhetorical analysis, will see this word comparison and understand I'm talking figurative language, metaphor specifically. Sanders says as much when he leads into the question with, who would pretend? Here he looks down upon anyone who would side with Rushdie and his ideas about moving, hence the derogatory attitude. So here I'm proving that I understand what derogatory means, that he's looking down upon anyone who would side with Rushdie, and this idea that moving is a virtue. So I'm connecting it all together, implying that they're pretending something is true when it is not. So this pops together to become a well-written analytical paragraph that identifies my inference of what the tone is, provides evidence, and thoroughly explains how that evidence proves the tone and addresses all parts of my claim. All right. So one last thing that I want to talk about, and that is shifting tone. So sometimes authors will start writing in one tone, one attitude towards what they're writing about, and then shift that. And they do that for effect. They do that as a choice to appeal to their audience in some way. All right. So that is an important thing to talk about when you're doing a rhetorical analysis. If the tone shifts, and why it shifts is important to identify. So an author's attitude can shift in a text. When you identify and analyze a shift in tone, please remember to do identify where the shift occurs, so where it changes from one to another tone. Analyze why the author chose to shift their attitude towards the subject, the message. Here, think about the rhetorical situation. What do we know about the speaker, purpose, audience, context, and exigence? And then find evidence in the text that supports your inference that each attitude is present. So where do you find evidence that one attitude is present and then the other attitude, or even another and another? It depends on how long the text is. And then do explain, connect the dots for your audience on how the evidence proves that tone or tones exist. Okay? So this is basically what we've talked about up until now, except that you're dealing with more than one. There are a lot of wonderful resources on tone out on the internet. Do remember that tone is not the same as mood. They are completely different concepts. So anything that talks about tone and mood together is inaccurate. But there are a lot of wonderful tone word handouts, so lists of words you could use to talk about tone. This one here is different from the one in our Week at a Glance. Let me just pop over. I think it's right here. Yeah. So this one is 12 pages long. I like it and wanted to share it with you because it does have definitions next to each word. So if you're looking to study and have a good long list of tone words at your disposal, this is a great listing. But in your Google Slides, your Week at a Glance, I also have this 2-page tone list that I also really like. Again, I took these from the internet. Didn't want to recreate the wheel. This tone list is 2 pages, and it groups words by positive, negative, sorrow, fear, worry, humor, irony, sarcasm, and miscellaneous. So this is a great 2-page listing of words you could use to talk about tone. You don't want to use the same tone word over and over and over again. You want to find words that are very specific to the text and situation. All right. That is it for tone. Let's continue to work on it and strengthen our writing. Until next time, guys, I'll see you later.